What if the man they left for dead swore he would return, not to be forgiven, but to finish the blood debt in full? A decorated warrior of the Emir's guard is betrayed by his closest brothers in arms after uncovering a political conspiracy. Left for dead in the desert, he swears a chilling oath. "I will return and kill you all." Years later, he resurfaces, cloaked in myth, seeking revenge. But when vengeance meets truth, the twist is darker than anyone imagined. The sun broke over Kano's old city walls like fire spilling across burnt ochre. Minarets shimmered in gold. Traders in flowing Baban Riga set up their wares, their shouts rising with the call to prayer. At the center of it all, mounted on a black stallion, Yahaya Dan Fodio rode through the crowd like a blade through silk, silent, gleaming, and sharp. He wore the Emir's white and green, the royal sash across his shoulder, and the gold-handled sword of the Emir himself. Children ran alongside his horse, shouting, "My Karfin Wuka," the man of the powerful blade. Others simply bowed. In the palace courtyard, servants cleared the path. Drummers tapped a slow rhythm as Yahaya dismounted, his boots touching the sandstone with deliberate weight. He turned his head briefly, catching the reflection of his own face in the polished steel of a ceremonial spear. Young, proud, eyes like storm clouds. Beside him, 3 other warriors approached, all men he had called brother since youth. Umar, tall, smooth-faced, always smiling too much. Idris, ever the charmer, adjusting his cloak. And Malam Bakery, massive, quiet, his face a stone mask under a deep scar on his temple. "You look like the Emir himself," Umar teased, clapping Yahaya on the back. Yahaya smirked. "The Emir doesn't bleed like I do." But even as laughter echoed in the courtyard, an elderly servant passed too slowly and whispered too softly, "The blade shines brightest before the strike." Yahaya turned, but the man was gone. A chill settled in his chest, like wind before a desert storm. And in the palace window, behind sheer curtains, someone watched Yahaya with narrowed eyes. Not with pride, with calculation. In less than 24 hours, the same hand Yahaya raised to salute the Emir would be bound in chains. Later that afternoon, in the private training yard behind the palace stables, the sound of steel meeting steel rang like music. Yahaya sparred with Bakery, their blades whirling like hawks in midair. Dust rose, sweat shone on muscle, and each clash sent echoes down the sandstone corridors. Idris and Umar sat in the shade, cheering and mocking as they placed silent bets. "These guards are lazy," Yahaya said between strikes. "They swing like drunk men." Bakery grunted. "Then why haven't you landed a blow?" Yahaya twirled his blade under Bakery's sword and swept his legs. The giant collapsed with a laugh. They were not just warriors. They were family, raised together by the palace after their fathers fell in war. Together they ate, fought, and bled. In the nights, they shared dreams of leadership, honor, and of protecting Kano's heart. "Do you ever wonder," Idris asked, "what we'll be remembered for?" Umar replied smoothly, "We'll be legends. The 4 blades of Kano." Yahaya only smiled. Legends still die. None of them knew that far above them, in the Emir's private hall, a scroll had been found in Yahaya's quarters. A scroll that would change everything. It was nearly midnight when Yahaya crept through the palace archive, his cloak damp with sweat. His torch flickered against stone walls lined with ancient records, royal decrees, land grants, bloodline maps of the Fulani rulers. But what he held in his hand now wasn't royal. It was dangerous. He had taken it from a dead bandit that morning, hidden in a leather satchel sewn into his horse saddle. The parchment was rough, foreign in design. It bore a strange Hausa script and the seal of the palace vizier, one of the Emir's oldest advisors. Yahaya read again, his brows furrowed. It spoke of smuggling weapons to the south, bribing palace guards, and plans to replace the Emir with a puppet ruler under foreign control. The signature at the bottom? Umar's. He stood frozen. No, this had to be fake. some ploy to stir distrust. But his instincts, honed through years of war, whispered otherwise. He couldn't sleep. So he did what any brother would do. He went straight to Umar's chambers. "Read this," Yahaya said, thrusting the scroll into his hands. "Tell me it's a lie." Umar took it slowly. His face was unreadable. The candlelight flickered between them. Then he smiled. Just faintly. "Of course it's a lie," he said, folding it up. "You trust me, don't you?" Yahaya hesitated. "With my life." "Then sleep, brother. Tomorrow we will bring this to the emir together." But the next morning, Yahaya awoke to silence. His room had been stripped, his sword missing, and guards stood at the door. "By order of the emir," they said coldly, "you are under arrest for treason." In the courtyard where he once trained, he would now be judged. And none of his brothers would speak in his defense. The underground hall beneath the great mosque of Kano was meant for royal council and secret prayers. But tonight, it hosted something far darker. Yahaya was dragged in by 2 guards, his hands bound with thick rope. Around him, high-ranking palace figures sat in silence, faces half-lit by lanterns that swung gently, casting dancing shadows on the ancient stone walls. At the far end stood Emir Khalid ibn Suleiman, draped in layers of silk and turbaned with gold. His face was unreadable. Next to him stood Umar, arms folded. Idris and Bakery stood further back, their faces dim and motionless. Yahaya scanned them all. "Tell them," he said, voice firm. "Tell them it's a lie." The emir raised the scroll. "This was found in your room, Yahaya. With your seal. With plans to assassinate me and seize Kano with foreign aid. How do you explain this?" Yahaya's jaw tightened. "It's a forgery. A trick. I gave it to Umar last night." All eyes turned to Umar. Umar took a deep breath and shook his head. "I never saw this scroll. I believe Yahaya acted alone. Perhaps he feared being replaced." Yahaya felt like the floor had disappeared beneath him. "You liar!" he shouted, lunging forward. Guards restrained him. Bakery looked away. Idris stared at the ground. But the worst part wasn't their silence. It was how easily the emir believed them. The verdict was passed, desert exile. Death by heat, thirst, and abandonment. A punishment reserved for traitors. Blindfolded and stripped of honor, Yahaya was thrown onto a camel at dawn. The journey was silent, grim. The sun blistered overhead as he was taken far beyond the city gates, past the date palms, past the last wells, into the red dunes where vultures circled the skies like devils. When the camel stopped, he was pulled down roughly. Idris, eyes nervous, muttered, "This wasn't supposed to go this far." Yahaya spat at his feet. "You were supposed to be my brother." Bakery said nothing. He simply dug a shallow pit with his hands. Umar knelt beside Yahaya, untied his wrists, then retied them behind his back. "You were always the sword," he said coldly. "But I was always the hand." They left him buried up to the chest in sand. No water. No blade. No prayers. As the sun rose higher, Yahaya's lips cracked, his skin burned, and his heart pounded like a drum before death. But he did not beg. He looked at the backs of the 3 men walking away, his brothers, now traitors, and whispered through cracked lips, "I will return and kill you all." The sand swallowed his scream. But something ancient in the desert heard him. Hours passed. Then a day. The sun glared like a god with no mercy. Yahaya's eyes blurred, blood crusted at the corners of his mouth. Flies buzzed. Vultures began circling. One landed nearby. He stared at it, defiant. "Not yet," he rasped. Suddenly, a whisper of wind shifted the dunes. A camel's grunt broke the silence. A cloaked figure emerged from the heat haze, riding with grace. Her indigo veil wrapped tightly around her face, only her eyes visible. She dismounted, approached, and knelt beside him. She poured water over his mouth slowly, carefully. Yahaya coughed violently but drank. Her voice was quiet, sharp like steel wrapped in silk. You should be dead. He choked out. Then why did you come? She unwrapped a gourd and began cutting the bindings. Because I bury warriors. Not liars. Her name was Zara, healer of the Tuareg, wanderer of the Sahara. She loaded Yahaya's broken body onto her camel and vanished into the dunes. Behind them, the vultures waited in silence, cheated of a meal. Yahaya's body would heal, but his soul was now carved with fire. Yahaya woke in a tent made of animal skin, surrounded by strange herbs and the faint scent of smoke. His body felt like stone, bruised, blistered, but alive. The desert outside moaned like a tired beast, its winds carrying stories in grains of sand. A small clay bowl of camel milk sat by his bedside. Zara stood over him, adjusting cloth over her face, her eyes unreadable. "Where am I?" he croaked. "Far from anyone who wants you dead," she replied, wrapping new bandages around his ribs. "You were talking in your sleep. Something about killing." Yahaya sat up painfully. "I made a vow." She didn't ask what it was. In the following days, Zara nursed him with quiet strength. She was no mere desert nomad. Her tent bore old scrolls, tribal weapons, even amulets from long-dead Hausa kings. She moved with knowledge and loss. One night, Yahaya asked, "Why did you save me?" She looked into the fire. "Because I once let a man die who was innocent. I won't do it again." Then she added softly, "But revenge is fire, Yahaya. And fire doesn't care who it burns." That night, Yahaya removed his bandages and began to train again. Beneath the moon, deep in the dunes where no voice could echo far, Yahaya moved like a shadow. Zara watched from a distance as he swung a wooden staff, mimicking the swordplay of his youth. His feet bled. His back ached. But his movements sharpened by the day. Vengeance had replaced hunger. Rage had replaced weakness. He fashioned a crude blade from desert iron, polished smooth against stone. He crafted a mask from goat hide, painted black with charcoal. He began speaking less, eating less, dreaming more of blood, betrayal, and redemption. Zara pleaded with him to stop. "Your mind is healing, but your soul is bleeding," she said. He tied a black turban around his face and gazed across the dunes toward the north, toward Kano. "I am not Yahaya anymore," he said. "Then what are you?" He stared into the fire. "A debt collector." In time, the traders who passed through the desert began whispering of a masked horseman who robbed only soldiers, one who left marks carved into wood near the bodies of corrupt men. 1, 2, 3. In Kano, the first whisper came, "He's back." In the palace, Waziri Umar now sat closer to the emir's throne than ever before. The people called him Maifiki, the strategist. Idris wore rich new robes and held a commander's post. Bakery had grown fatter, crueler. All of them believed Yahaya to be long dead. Until that morning, a guard stumbled into the hall, bloodied, panting. Caravan ambushed, out of nowhere, masked horsemen, didn't steal anything. "What did he want?" Umar asked. "Just this." The guard handed him a strip of wood, carved with blood. 1. Umar froze. Idris turned pale. Bakery's massive hand tightened on the hilt of his axe. "It's a trick," Umar said too quickly. "A criminal using his name." But in the market square that day, an old woman selling dates whispered to a customer, "Yahaya rides again." And the rumor spread like harmattan fire through the alleys of Kano. Idris started to carry a dagger under his robe. But no blade could stop what was already riding toward him. The alley behind the dye pits of Kano was narrow and choked with steam. Idris moved quickly through it, his guards behind him. He'd just left a woman's house, too drunk to think clearly. But something itched in his bones. He turned. No one. The alley was empty. Then he saw it. A black mark on the wall. Carved into mud. 1. His guards dropped one by one. A blur. A hiss of steel. A scream silenced by blood. Idris ran, stumbling, cloak flapping behind him. He darted into the side corridor behind a tailor's shop. His breath caught. A man stood there. Masked. Silent. Yahaya. Idris whispered, backing away. You're not real. Umar said you. The masked man advanced. No words. Just the slow drawing of a curved blade. Idris screamed, begged, and fell to his knees. It wasn't me. It was all Umar. I swear. The blade glinted once in the moonlight. Slice. As Idris's head fell into shadow, the figure leaned down and whispered. 1. In the morning, Kano would wake to find Idris's body hung by the city gate, with a message carved into his chest. The debt has begun. The palace was no longer at peace. The hallways once echoing with court laughter now whispered like a graveyard. Amir Khalid, aging and confused, sat high on his throne but seemed smaller somehow, his gaze fogged with doubt. Idris's execution had rattled the court, and Umar, his most trusted advisor, was cracking beneath the weight of unseen pressure. At night, he paced the floors of his chamber like a trapped animal. Seal the gates, he barked. Double the guards. No soldier moves without my order. But the people are growing restless, warned the palace steward. Some call him a hero. A hero? Umar slammed his fist on the marble table. He is a traitor returned from the grave. Bakery, now head of palace security, said nothing. But his eyes were sharp. He had fought beside Yahaya once, knew how dangerous the man had been. He's hunting us, Bakery said. He won't stop at Idris. Umar leaned in. Then we strike first. That night, Umar sent word south to hire foreign mercenaries. Warriors who didn't fear ghosts. Far from the chaos of Kano, under a sky full of stars, Zara found Yahaya kneeling beside a fire, sharpening his blade. His mask lay beside him, untouched for the first time in weeks. His face had changed, harder now, drained of warmth. He no longer looked like a man, but like someone returned from fire with nothing left but vengeance. She stood in silence for a moment, then said softly, You killed again. I fulfilled my oath, he answered without emotion. And how many will it take to bring peace to your bones? He paused, staring into the flames. As many as it takes. Zara walked closer, placing a hand on his shoulder. Yahaya, if you let rage carve your path, you'll lose more than your enemies. You'll lose yourself. You already have. He turned toward her, his voice low. You saved my body, Zara, but not my soul. That was already buried in the desert. Before dawn, Yahaya wrapped his mask again. His next mark was clear. Bakery. High atop Dala Hill, where legends said Kano was born, Bakery set the trap. Rumors had spread that Yahaya would visit the grave of an old mentor buried there. Bakery stationed 24 soldiers across the slope, archers hidden in rocks, swordsmen in shadows. In the center stood a child, no older than 10, tied to a post. Yahaya arrived before sunset, walking openly, his black robes catching wind. He saw the boy, saw the guards. He didn't flinch. Bakery stepped forward, sword in hand. We trained under the same blade, brother. But you became a ghost. And you became a coward, Yahaya said. You killed Idris. That's one. Try me next. I wasn't here for you, Yahaya said, drawing his sword, until you used a child. What followed was madness, a blur of blade against blade, arrows missing their mark, soldiers falling to precise strikes like wheat to a scythe. Yahaya moved with fury and grace. He killed 10, 15. Then, as Bakery charged with his full bulk, Yahaya sidestepped and slammed his elbow into his throat. Bakery collapsed, gasping. Yahaya stood over him. You remember what we said as boys, he whispered. No blade between brothers. Bakery's lips bled. We were boys, not men. Slice. Kano woke to screams. Bakery's body was found nailed to the gates of the soldiers' compound, his massive axe buried in his own chest. Carved across his forehead were the words, The oath is not broken. Panic gripped the city. Mothers kept children inside. Merchants closed early. The emir's council met in secret. Guards refused to patrol alone. And in the streets, young men began to whisper Yahaya's name not with fear, but with fire. "He is not a traitor," one said. "He is cleansing the rot." "Let him finish," said another. "Then let Kano breathe again." But not all were cheering. In a dark corridor of the palace, Umar stood trembling, staring at Bakery's severed hand on a table. His wife, Sadia, entered behind him, holding a glass of wine. "You look tired, my husband," she said calmly. "I'm being hunted," he muttered. "Maybe," she said. "This is what you deserve." Sadia stepped out into the night, and someone followed her. That night, Umar's sleep was broken by sweat and screams. He dreamed of fire. He dreamed of Yahaya standing at the foot of his bed, blade in hand, face scorched beyond human. Yahaya didn't speak. He just watched, waiting. Umar awoke gasping, heart racing, sheets soaked. He stumbled to the balcony for air, and saw something horrifying. On the palace wall across from his window, a red 2 had been painted. In blood. He collapsed to the floor, shaking. "It's not real, it can't be." But when servants rushed in and tried to wipe it away, the blood wouldn't fade. That day, he called an emergency council. "No more hiding," he announced. "Yahaya dies. We burn every camp outside Kano. Arrest his supporters. Block the roads. And anyone caught whispering his name loses their tongue." But deep down, Umar knew. The blood wouldn't stop. And his number was next. Somewhere beneath the palace, a woman sharpens a dagger, not for Yahaya, but for her husband. In the quiet stillness of the women's quarters, Sadia traced her fingers across the rim of a goblet. The night was warm, but her skin was cold. She stared at the face of her husband, Umar, as he slept in twisted sheets, murmuring broken things in his dreams. She rose silently and stepped into the open corridor. The guards turned away. They feared her now, as Umar's favored wife. She slipped past them like wind, through the side gate and into the dark alleys of Kano's underbelly. In an abandoned grain shed outside Kofar Nazarawa, a man sat sharpening a blade under a dim lantern. Sadia stepped forward. "You knew I would come." Yahaya didn't look up. "You always do." They stood for a long time in silence, old love buried under war and betrayal. Then she whispered, "I read the real scroll. Umar forged your treason charge. You were innocent." "I know," Yahaya said quietly. "But it no longer matters." Tears rimmed her eyes. "It matters to me. I carry his child. But I don't want him to bear his father's name." Yahaya finally looked at her. "Then teach him the truth. Not power." As she turned to leave, Sadia handed him something wrapped in silk, Umar's personal seal. It was Salah week, and Kano bloomed with music, perfume, and blood-red drapes hung from wooden poles. The Festival of Knives, a warrior tradition meant to honor the city's defenders, turned the courtyards into stages where fighters danced with steel. The emir arrived flanked by guards, resplendent in white silk. Behind him walked Umar, jaw clenched, sleepless eyes darting at every shadow. Every laugh, every drumbeat, sounded like a threat. At the height of the celebration, a masked butcher stepped forward for the exhibition duel. His clothes stained with animal blood, his face hidden behind red cloth. He bowed to the emir. Then he turned toward Umar and attacked. Chaos erupted. Guards lunged. Swords clanged. But the masked man moved with impossible speed. He didn't strike the emir. He didn't kill a single guard. But he threw a dagger that embedded into the stage post, bearing Umar's seal. Then he vanished into smoke. Umar stood frozen. The crowd, once cheering, fell silent, staring at the seal. Rumors rippled like a shockwave. Was Umar a traitor? That night, a masked figure appeared in 5 markets, whispering, "Umar killed Yahaya. Yahaya lives." In the back alleys of Kano, not far from the dye pits, A boy named Bashir watched a wanted poster flutter in the wind. It bore the face of a man who shouldn't exist. Yahaya, masked in black, eyes burning with judgment. Bashir was 13. Skinny. Clever. Too poor to eat daily, too stubborn to beg. He heard whispers in the market. Anyone who brought information on Yahaya would be rewarded. Enough gold to feed a family for a year. That night, he followed a robed man leaving a fruit vendor. The man moved like water, head always low, avoiding torchlight. Bashir followed through alleys, across rooftops, until the man paused near the old well at Tuduanwada. "I know you," the boy called out. The man turned slowly. "Do you? You're the ghost." "Yahaya." The figure said nothing. Bashir raised a small knife. His hand trembled. The man stepped forward unarmed and tossed a warm bread roll at the boy's feet. "Never trust the ones who feed you lies," he said. "Eat, and run home." Bashir ran, but his eyes burned with something new: loyalty. At dawn, the palace barracks were found empty. Half the guards had deserted. A scroll lay nailed to the barak door. "You call him a traitor, but we trained under him, fought beside him, bled beside him. If he returns from the grave, then who are the real ghosts?" That night, in the heart of Kurmi Market, Yahaya walked openly through the crowd. No mask, no robe, just his face, aged by fire, shadowed by pain. A woman screamed. A boy bowed. A guard dropped his spear and fled. People gathered. Some whispered. Some cheered. He didn't speak. He just looked at the crowd and raised a single finger. 2. Then he walked into the shadows again. By morning, the city pulsed with fever. He's not a ghost. He's justice. In the palace, Amir Khalid began to question if the wrong man had worn the royal sash all along. Umar returned home that night to find his room quiet, too quiet. His guards gone. His wine was already poured. Sadia stood at the balcony, her back to him. "Why is it so still?" he asked. "Because the storm has passed," she said. He approached her cautiously. "You've been strange since Bakery died." "I've been awake," she replied. He drank the wine in one slow gulp. Then coughed. Then choked. His knees buckled. "What did you do?" "Nothing," she said. "You did this to yourself. Every lie, every betrayal, you drank them long ago." Umar collapsed, gasping. But she didn't watch him die. She walked into the corridor, tears in her eyes, and whispered to a servant, "Take me to Yahaya." But behind her, Umar stopped shaking. He had tricked her. The wine was not poisoned. And now he knew she had chosen her side. The streets of Kano were no longer safe for the emir's guards. Graffiti appeared on palace walls. He was loyal. You betrayed him. Yahaya lives. Kano sees. 1, 2, 3. In marketplaces, old women clutched their grandchildren and whispered stories about the man who rose from the sand. Vendors told travelers that Yahaya once saved a village from bandits, fought off raiders, and healed children during war. The lies had begun to crumble, and the truth, though sharpened by myth, found its way back. Palace soldiers tried to silence dissent, but when they arrested a griot who sang a song about the warrior with fire in his eyes, the people rioted. Tear gas failed. Swords were drawn. Even some palace guards refused to swing. Inside the throne room, Amir Khalid sat sweating. "The city bleeds through my fingers," he muttered. Umar bowed, forcing calm. "Then we must cut the vein feeding it." "And what vein is that?" Umar's eyes gleamed darkly. "Sadia. And the boy." That night, Umar gave a silent order. "Bring them to me. Alive if possible. Dead if necessary." But it was too late. At dawn, fire broke out in the palace kitchens. Then the armory. Then the eastern watchtower. Saboteurs disguised as servants had infiltrated the palace. And when the soldiers tried to respond, they found the gates chained from the outside. It wasn't a fire. It was a purge. Umar barely escaped, wearing a beggar's robe, a dagger strapped to his ankle. With only one loyal guard, he fled through secret tunnels beneath the palace. "Where will you go, Waziri?" the guard asked. "Anywhere he can't follow," Umar hissed. But even as they rode out of the city on stolen horses, villagers spotted him. Word spread. Umar runs. The traitor flees. In the shadows of the dunes, Yahaya already knew. That night, the final mark was painted across Umar's abandoned room. 3. They met at dawn in the stone ruins of Mega Hill, where as boys they had first trained with wooden swords. Umar's horse foamed at the mouth. Yahaya walked on foot, cloak trailing behind him, his blade resting across his shoulders like a hunter's bow. Umar stood shaking, dagger in hand. "You want revenge? Fine. Let it end here." "I don't want revenge," Yahaya said, circling him. "I want balance. You swore to kill us all. And I kept my word." Steel flashed. The duel was brutal. Not elegant. Not heroic. Just pain. Sweat. Blood. Umar was quicker than expected. Desperation had made him savage. But Yahaya was unbreakable. A lion forged in desert pain. A blade honed by betrayal. Umar fell to his knees, mouth bleeding. "Please spare me. I was weak. I envied you. You were always more." Yahaya stepped closer, raised his sword. Then stopped. "No," he said. "You don't deserve death." Umar looked up, confused. "You deserve to live with the knowledge that everything you built has turned to ash. That the people know. That your name will rot." He lowered the blade and whispered. 3. Yahaya turned and walked away. Behind him, Umar screamed, louder than any blade could cut. Later that night, Umar stumbled into a camp near the outskirts, bloodied and broken, begging a merchant for help. The merchant recognized him, but said nothing. No one in the camp did. They served him water. Let him sleep. But at midnight he awoke to silence. A figure sat beside his fire. Dressed in white. Face veiled. "You should have let me die in the sand," the figure said. It was Sadia. Umar tried to speak. She pressed a finger to his lips. No words. Only silence now. She held the knife gently. With sadness. She didn't stab fast. It was slow. Deliberate. A quiet mercy for all that had been stolen. Before sunrise, Umar's body was found at the edge of the dunes, a single sentence written beside him in blood. His wife buried the knife. Yahaya never spoke of Umar again, but he carried Sadia's blood-soaked scarf with him from that day forward. With the palace in ruin, the emir sick and untrusted, the council of elders met in secret. No guards. No politicians. Just those whose hands were clean. The people demanded change. Justice. Restoration. They crowned a new emir, young, wise, and humble, Sadia's son. Yahaya refused the throne. "I've spilled too much blood to ever wear a crown." Instead, he stood before the people in Kof Armada, where warriors once paraded in peacetime, and removed his mask. His scars glistened in sunlight. His voice rang across the walls. "I did not return for power. I returned for truth. And truth, once buried, can still rise." A cheer erupted. Some wept. But Yahaya's eyes remained cold. He turned, disappeared into the crowd, no longer a ghost, but no longer a man either. A child once saved by Yahaya watched from the crowd, clutching his own carved blade, and swore an oath of his own. The Harmattan sky blazed copper as Yahaya rode south, following the same dunes that once swallowed him. Every hoofbeat kicked up a memory. Idris's laughter, Bakery's grunt, Umar's pleading eyes. At the edge of a salt flat he found Zara's camp, no longer bustling with traders, but silent, almost skeletal. Tattered blue Tuareg banners snapped in the dry wind like mourning shrouds. Inside the largest goatskin tent, a brazier glowed weakly. Zara lay on woven mats, her indigo veil pulled loose, revealing a face gaunt yet serene. The healer who had taught him mercy now coughed dark blood into a clay bowl. I heard the city roar with your name, she rasped, eyes glinting. It roars with blood, he answered, kneeling. I came to repay a debt. Debts, she whispered, smiling faintly, are never settled with more blood. He tried to feed her water, but her hands trembled. She pressed a talisman, an old Fulani brass pendant, into his palm. Carry this, to remind you a blade isn't the only way. Lightning flickered on the horizon. A rare desert storm rolled in. Rest, he said, voice cracking. She closed her eyes. Rest when the vengeance rests. Thunder boomed, Zara's breath rattled, and stopped, as rain began to fall on the Sahara for the first time in months. Yahaya buried Zara at dawn beneath an acacia tree, smoothing the mound with his bare hands until his knuckles bled. As the sun climbed, grief twisted into fire. He mounted his stallion and galloped toward Jaidan Rumfa, a minor fortress rumored to shelter men who sold weapons to Umar's mercenaries. The courtyard guards barely saw him before his blade flashed. Steel rang against steel, screams echoed off mud-brick walls, and hot crimson splattered prayer rugs. Inside, a terrified clerk, no older than 16, eyes wide as the moon, cowered behind crates. I only keep ledgers, the boy cried. Rage drowned reason. Yahaya's sword pierced cloth, flesh, silence. When it was over, flies droned around cooling bodies. He stared at the lifeless clerk, the ink-stained fingers still clutching a pen. The pen looked exactly like the one Idris once lent him during lessons beneath Dala Hill. Yahaya's stomach twisted. What have I become? He whispered, wiping the blade. But the blood on his hands seemed to darken, not fade. Behind him, hoofbeats approached. Bashir emerged, waving a parchment. You need to see this, before more innocents die. Bashir unfolded the brittle document on a fallen drum. Its seal, wax the color of dried pomegranate, belonged to Emir Khalid himself. I stole it from the palace archives during the chaos, the boy said, chest heaving. Read. By torchlight, Yahaya scanned the Hausa script. Forged receipts, false witness statements, and a confession coerced by Umar's bribes to the vizier. One line shattered him. The emir acted on doctored evidence, ignorant of the true loyalty of Captain Yahaya Danfodio. The revelation struck like a cudgel. His oath had never been against the throne, only against the men who poisoned it. Yet he had burned the marketplace, crushed the garrison, killed a mere clerk, all while the emir's own heart had carried regret. Bashir watched tears carve fresh paths through the dust on Yahaya's face. So the emir, he's not our enemy? Yahaya's voice was a low quake. No. The enemy is the monster I let vengeance make of me. A messenger dove swooped overhead, carrying black-ribbon news. The young emir-in-waiting, Sadia's son, lay deathly ill, cursed, some whispered, by the sins of his father's blood. In Kano's royal clinic, tassa drums thumped in an anxious rhythm, while herbal smoke curled around brass lanterns. The child emir writhed under indigo sheets, skin hot as forge iron, pupils rolling white. Sadia knelt at the bedside, clutching prayer beads that clicked like chattering teeth. Every remedy fails, the court malam murmured, sprinkling Quran verses across the boy's brow. This is not an ordinary sickness. Rumor spread through the courtyard. A Jaidan Goro, spirit of bitterness, followed Yahaya's blade. Each life taken unjustly turned back as poison for the innocent. Some swore they saw a pale silhouette pacing rooftops above the palace, counting, always counting. Yahaya slipped into the ward disguised in a surgeon's robe. Sadia looked up, hope and horror colliding in her gaze. Save him, she pleaded. He took the child's frail hand, felt a pulse flutter like a trapped moth, and realized the curse was his own doing, whether legend or guilt. I will not raise another sword until his heartbeat steadies, he vowed. If blood demands payment, let it take mine. Outside, palace guards spotted the surgeon's shadow and sounded the alarm. Torches converged on the clinic from every corner of Kano. Chaos erupted in the moonlit courtyards. Citizens who once cheered Yahaya now shrank back as soldiers shouted, "Madman! Murderer!" Arrows hissed overhead, windows slammed shut. Flames from toppled torches caught on woven mats, and the sweet smell of burning henna filled the air. Yahaya dashed through smoke-clogged corridors, Childemir cradled against his chest, Bashir clearing paths with a stolen spear. Shadows warped across muraled walls depicting Kano's ancient heroes. Heroes whose eyes seemed to judge him with every step. Under Kofar Mata's crimson archway they emerged into the street, but a frightened butcher hurled a cleaver, grazing Yahaya's arm. "Monster!" the man screamed. Women spat curses, children cried. The legend had inverted, protector to plague. Yahaya's mask, once a symbol of justice, now dripped with the city's fear. He placed the feverish boy in Bashir's arms. "Take him to Zara's herb cache by the dunes. There's silverleaf, grind it with goat's milk." "What about you?" the boy asked. Yahaya drew a final deep breath, staring at the inferno-consuming Kano's night sky. "I must face the city I broke." As Bashir vanished into the dark, Yahaya turned toward the advancing mob, unmasked, unarmed, whispering a single prayer. "Let the debt end with me." Smoke rose over Kano like a second sky. Yahaya stood alone in the city square as chaos bloomed. Soldiers clashed with rioting citizens, and torches danced like devils across rooftops. His name, once whispered like hope, now cracked from mouths like a curse. "There he is!" someone screamed. A thrown spear grazed his leg. Another man hurled a pestle that cracked against his shoulder. Yahaya did not run. He staggered forward, hands open, cloak singed at the hem. "I came with fire to destroy snakes," he shouted, voice raw. "But now I see, I burned the garden too." Stones flew. Some missed. One struck his cheek, drawing blood. He fell to one knee, but still refused to raise his fists. "I was wrong," he gasped. "If this city must bleed, let it bleed through me." A child's voice rang through the crowd, Bashir, holding up the Amir boy, now breathing calmly. He saved him. Yahaya saved the child. All turned to look. Bashir pushed through the angry crowd, sweat and dust streaking his cheeks, the child Amir in his arms wrapped in goat leather. "You want to kill him?" Bashir shouted. "Kill me first." No one moved. The boy climbed a broken fountain and stood tall. He hunted those who betrayed us. "Idris? Bakery? Umar. They left you to starve while they dined in gold." Yahaya fought for justice, even when it tore him apart. An elderly merchant lowered his spear. A soldier dropped his blade. A mother wept openly. From the palace roof, the old Emir watched it unfold and whispered to his advisors, "We condemned the wrong son." Then, from among the people, a voice muttered, "If he lays down his sword, I lay down mine." Another followed, and another. The tide turned, not with blood but with memory. As Yahaya collapsed in the square from exhaustion, someone caught him. Sadia. 3 graves stood beyond Jakara River, dug by Yahaya's own hands. One for Idris, though his body was never found. One for Bakery, with his axe buried beside the stone. One for Umar, marked not by his name, but by Yahaya's own scarf, pierced through with a single nail. Sadia stood beside him in silence. Bashir stood on the other side, arms folded like a warrior though barely taller than the shovel. "What now?" she asked quietly. Yahaya didn't respond. He placed the pendant Zara had given him on Umar's grave. "Justice is no longer mine to carry. You became a curse to free us," Bashir said. "And in doing so you became something more." Yahaya nodded but said nothing. He pulled a final bundle from beneath his cloak, a carved wooden tablet that read, "I was the sword, but I was also the wound." He planted the tablet between the 3 graves, and left his mask hanging from it. Yahaya disappeared into the southern dunes days later. No horse, no weapons, just cloth, water, and silence. Rumors rose like heat. Some said he'd become a hermit in the valleys of Folklore forest. Others claimed Tuareg nomads saw a black-cloaked figure walking toward Lake Chad. One griot even sang that he had turned into the wind, punishing those who lied. But those who truly knew kept quiet, because the man who had returned from death, broken empires, and silenced tyrants had no name now. No vengeance. No title. He had left those behind in a city where fire once ruled. Bashir returned to the palace and stood by the young emir's side as his advisor. Sadia retired to Zara's old hut and raised her son in truth. And in Kano they began to teach Yahaya's story, not as a war, but as a warning. One day, a new rebellion stirred, and in its early days someone whispered, "If he returns again, the fire will not be kind." In a village far from Kano, under a tree twisted by wind, a teacher told children the tale. They asked, why didn't he take the throne? Because the crown would not fit a head bowed by regret. Why did he not kill the emir? Because truth needs witnesses, not corpses. Was he good or bad? The teacher smiled sadly. He was a man, and men are never only one thing. As the sun set, the storyteller pointed to a mound of red rock in the distance, where the wind sang against stone. There, he said. They say his bones lie beneath. Or maybe just his sorrow. And as the last line was spoken, a gust of wind kicked up dust across the hill. A single black cloth fluttered in the sky, then vanished. Final words. The oath is fulfilled, but the fire remembers.